Good evening. Welcome to Township Board of Trustees meeting for Tuesday, August 6th. Mr. Massey, would you lead us in the pledge?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, and as we call the meeting to order, I'd seek a motion for approval of the agenda that's been presented.
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion? All's in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we will open the floor for public comment, and anybody in the front of the room? Okay.
Hey, nobody gotta get up on me.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Erb.
Good evening, Ed, 7212 Porter Road. I just have a couple small comments here. Item D on your agenda, $13,450, to ask the voters if they want to be on a permanent absentee ballot list. I don't understand this. The voters voted for this. Are you trying to remind the voters that, what, do you think they forgot? So to me, that doesn't make sense. I don't know, maybe I'll understand it once I hear you guys talk about it. The other item I wanted to talk about was the police millage. I see it's for 5 years. I always thought it was nice at 10, but 5's okay. If something happened that you were short money and you made it 10, you could do the same thing you did with the fire department. You know, just ask for more, but I just thought that it'd be a little bit simpler. That way, the board or boards in the future don't have to keep rehashing this every 5 years. And that's pretty close to a cycle for elections for this board. It's a year off, and I think if you follow it out, it'd be right during an election year. And you don't have things on the ballot too often during election years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Erb. Any other public comment? With that, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the board. And with that, we have a board presentation this evening with Mr. Potter from Potter Consulting, and he's going to present an overview of the planned water and sewer capital projects. Good evening, Mr. Potter.
Good evening, everybody. With us heading into budget season and the rate study with Raftalis, Dennis asked me to kind of come and give an overview of the capital side of things. We've talked about the cost of service side of things and the DPW budget and those kind of items. The other side of that rate study and the other side of this is how we look at capital projects going forward and where we started from. In 2004, Rowe Engineering and myself, at the request of the township, put together a water and sewer master plan that outlined all of the infrastructure that was required through the build out of the township. So if anybody built anything anywhere, we've got the infrastructure ready to go or ready to be financed in that case. So as we go through this process, we take that build out capital improvement program, and each year we look at the 5-year forecast for that capital improvement program. And then we look at a spreadsheet like this that outlines where we think those projects might fall and what those costs might be. So if we just look down the projects real quickly here, District 6 and 11 is a sanitary sewer that goes up Vassar Road to the city that would serve all of District 6 and 11, which would be Tech Village, Woodfield area, all of that area, and goes up to the city. DPW building is pretty self-explanatory. Tech Village is the water main that would be provided for the Tech Village layout up there. District 8 sanitary sewer, that serves the hospital district for that expansion. 2019 looping projects is some small looping projects in the township, and we try to pick off a few of those looping projects every year or every 2 years. Typically they're $100,000 or $200,000 a piece, something in that range. I think this time we've got 3 or 4 that are in the $1 million range for a total. Baldwin Road sanitary sewer connection or construction, another sewer on Baldwin Road. Slack Lake sanitary sewer is the sewer that goes down through Woodfield that would also help serve Tech Village area and that southern area of the township. And then Center Road 24-inch water main is a water main that's going to come down Center Road, downhill and down Dort Highway to the Embry Booster Station. That's going to serve the center of the township and that's Embry Booster Station, so that we have basically a loop around the entire township and then a loop down the middle of the township.
Where is that again? If you can.
It's going to go from Maple and Center, down Center Road to Hill, west on Hill, and then down Dort all the way to Embry Road pump station.
And what year was that?
That's the last one, Center Road 24-inch water main project. That's 2029 is where we currently have it. But it all depends on growth. I mean, that's the other thing, that these projections all depend on where the growth comes. I mean, we've got District 8 sanitary sewer at a certain place. If District 8 doesn't go, but Tech Village goes, then it changes. So the concept here is that we have the projects outlined and we let the growth decide when they get built. But we try to project out what that is going to happen.
So like that line, Dan, excuse me for
Yep.
interrupting, but are those are not in the roadway, are they, or?
We try not to. We try to keep them in the road right of way. So we don't like to have any of the utilities in the roadway. That's the goal.
Right, especially when they just repaved them.
Yes. So center, yeah, all the water and sewer facilities, we try very hard to keep them out of the roadway, but in the road right of way, or in the easement that we've procured.
So that would go down, so you're saying Center Road, Center and Maple, down Center to Hill Road,
To Hill Road,
and then Hill to Dort?
Hill to Dort.
So we're getting ready for a major project on Hill Road, right between Saginaw Street and Center? That's pretty narrow there. They probably will have to go into the road there, right?
There's a lot of options, but yeah.
Okay.
And that's just the preliminary layout. I mean,
Right.
the layout can change.
Yeah.
It's just that we want a loop down the center of the township to help supply water.
Sure.
Because the more loops you have, the less
Oh, absolutely.
friction losses we have in the pipeline. So it's, that's the long-range plan.
I'm just thinking with the road
Yeah,
projects and
that's,
coordinating it, so if they're gonna do a major project.
Absolutely.
and it's funny you say that, because one of the things we just ran into recently on one of the looping projects is we're putting something in to provide future service, and the DEQ is giving us a hard time, because in this case, it's at the Dort Highway extension, but it's gonna be a dead end for some short period of time until we can loop that back someplace. So they're like, ooh, all shook up, they don't wanna let us put that in, so we had a long discussion with them about that project. So this kind of lays out the projects and whether we plan to pay cash or bond for them. And again, that can change depending on the timing of the project. If the timing changes, then we may bond for it or pay cash for it. But at least we have a look at it and something that we can deal with and talk to Ralph Tellis and other people about what our plan is and how much our costs are, so that they can build a rate model that's effective. So then, the next, any questions on that? Yep, sorry.
Earl?
Yeah, I just had one question. I noticed in 2020 that you got an estimate about $7 million. What are the chances of all those hitting in 2020?
Well, District 8, the $3.3 million project is, 99% sure, because that's tied to Dort Highway Extension.
Right, so that's a go,
So
right?
that's a go.
Okay,
Tech Village is probably a 20 or 21 project. It just depends on how that goes and how long it takes to get. At this point in time, it's taking about a year to get a set of plans through all the review agencies.
right.
So it may be 21, but
So
it's
the 2 million should go to 20, well, approximately, we think maybe 21, right?
2021, it's still a bit of a crapshoot.
Okay. And then you got two of them there for Tech Village, right? 2 million and then
Yeah,
also.
water and sewer.
So both of those will go to 21, you think? Or probably, wouldn't you do one of them first or not?
No, because they're gonna get constructed in conjunction with the road.
With the road, right? So they're both gonna go to 21.
Well,
Maybe.
There's a possibility they could go to 21. It just depends on that development, the speed of that development.
Right, I
And how
understand.
fast it
Right.
could still be done in 20, or started in 20.
we projected it at 20, but it could go to 21.
Okay.
So then the next column down, DPW fund balance. Basically, we're taking a look at the fund balance that we currently have the estimated reserve requirements that we have, and the available cash that would be left after the projects for each year. So for instance, if we look at this year, we currently have about $15 million fund balance. Estimated reserves are $7 million, and available cash for capital projects is about 7.9. So then each year, as we move down this process, we calculate what the costs are, what the fund balance is, what the fund balance reserve is, and we can track where we think the fund balance goes, so that we can make sure that we're staying within the parameters that we want to stay with. The next column down is estimated revenues, capital fees, and TIF capture. So we're projecting the capital fees, water and sewer, Tech Village development capital fees, District 8 development capital fees, a DPW budget net to the fund balance of $400,000, and the DDA TIF capture. So that's the funds that we're using to pay for capital projects and bond payments. So again, we do the same calculation, looking at the total revenue available to handle the projects that we have to pay for. The next column down is RU growth projections. We take a look at what the projected build out of, say, Tech Village is. Tech Village, from the report, is a 10-year build out, so we build out that project over 10 years and the capital fees that would be coming in based on those RUs. The next column down, the blue column, is an alternative emergency bond funding look. In the event that some of our capital projects, our capital revenue didn't match what we thought it was going to be, this would be the impact of the rates on those bonds and projects. Then the next box down is the assumptions, a 10-year build out for Tech Village, construction plans, the residential percentages, the total square feet of Tech Village office, those kind of assumptions that we made in putting this document together. Was that too quick a?
So, Mr. Potter, most municipalities don't have something this detailed, I take it?
Probably not. I mean, most of the DPWs that are in the same caliber as Grand Blancs probably do.
Right.
But there's not a lot of those either.
So, you know, the whole idea is to be ready so that when we have a developer like Tech Village that, or could be anybody really, any portion of the township, that we're ready to go, that when developer comes here and says, can we get water, sewer, what have you, we've got a plan to deliver it.
That's exactly right. And in just about any case in the township, you know, if they came here with a set of plans ready to go, we'd have, if we didn't have the infrastructure there, we would have it there before they were building buildings. So.
Mr. Manser, I'm sorry, Mr. Massey?
Go ahead. So, I just kind of looking through here, I think a lot of the stuff we kind of know and is under our control, but there's a couple pieces, in particular the DDA TIF capture. Is that being planned in, Mr. Potter probably wouldn't know this, but is that being budgeted in? Is there considered into their budget and their revenue projections, their expenses?
Into the DPW's projections currently?
Well, is the DDA expecting to
On that one.
fund that line?
Yes.
Okay.
By 20, what year does that start?
2020.
20, yeah.
Right now, we have about $21 million projected over a 30-year lifespan of the DDA and from the DDA.
Mr. Massey?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I have a question. My question, would it be asking too much that whether there's a change or no change, you come back before the board every 6 months to report out in case?
You mean on this?
Yes.
Well, the DPW, I mean, this is just kind of a long-range plan, right? I mean, we'll see the budget for the DPW on an annual basis anyways, and...
Oh, I wasn't, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
I
sure.
wasn't speaking on one particular
Oh, okay,
subject.
okay.
I'm speaking as a whole. In 6 months, if there's a change, you come back and tell us what the change is. If there's no change, you just report out, no change at this time. Okay.
In this
Because things
plan, in this plan, you mean? Or?
in this plan here, the timeline, because the way I'm interpreting this, things are going to start picking up, and then the pace is going to be much more rapid than it is right now. So I'd like to see it every 6 months. If there's no change, you just report out, no change. And so that keep us on track. And we won't be blindsided.
Well, part of it's gonna, I mean, a good chunk of this is going to be, you know, well, Tech Village anyways, we'll know fairly soon what's going on with that, I think. And then, I mean, we're gonna be approving any of these things before they happen on here, obviously, right? I mean,
The board will know anytime if something got moved up or back, you're gonna know because that's when the project's gonna come before the board that we've got a project coming up and we're gonna have to do bonding and we're gonna have to do some other things. So this is really, it's an internal tool that we use. And I thought it was just really good based upon our conversation recently about the rate study, and that's why I asked Mr. Potter to come and do it, is just to show like we're always looking, 30 years out on what's going to happen and what do we need to do for cash flow, because I think it's important for two things. One, the investment committee conversations that we've had most recently about how much money do we have to invest and what does that look like and how much can be invested long term. And the other thing is just with our rates and how we set them, and this is going to be a big portion of that Raftelis study when they come through, is like how are you guys prepared to handle your capital? The other thing is with our whole asset management plan, the reason we're working with Potter Consulting and Rowe Engineering on the asset management plan is we have to be able to demonstrate when we want to qualify for grants or low interest loans that we have a plan in place to afford our capital expenditures moving forward, that we can afford the build out. So they all kind of tie together with a whole lot of things. It's really, it's a budgeting tool and it's a planning tool. As far as, none of the projects necessarily, like they're not moving forward unless they come before the board. Any of these are gonna, every one of them will come before the board before we move forward, and you'll approve each one individually.
well, I think we've seen other municipalities get into trouble where there's no plan for the gradual replacement of, a planned replacement of infrastructure. It's kind of like, if we only decide to buy a police car when it went bad, every meeting we'd be deciding, well, do we want to buy another police car? Well, instead we have a plan for how we're going to replace those, and the same goes for even the stuff we can't see underground is, hey, we know that stuff is aging, and in 30 years we know what's going to need to be replaced, so why not put that in a plan that we know that, we're going to project to expand this area, we're going to look to improve it, what have you, so it helps us to project out 20, 30 years, but it also, as you mentioned, with this study that we're going to do on the rate study, I mean, we have to project what's going to need upgrading.
And that's the key to all this asset management planning and the capital improvement planning that we've done. We have to make sure that we have the rates in place to support what we're projecting needs to be done, but that has to be balanced against, good fiscal policy so that we're doing the right thing with all of the stuff that we're doing in terms of the DPW. So, and that's one of the nice things about Raftelis is they're probably arguably the biggest rate study firm in the country. And so they've seen virtually everything. So if there's something going on in California that there's a new rate analysis or a new rate structure, we're going to hear about those kind of things. And that's one of the reasons it's good to have an outside look every 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it is, so that we make sure that we're staying on top of the latest trends.
Sure, Mr. Massey.
I don't think probably I made myself clear enough. Let me try again. So, hypothetical situation. So if we don't keep this on the front burner, okay? So you come back in a year from now, we forget about the timelines, okay? Something comes up and I come to a meeting, or one of my colleagues come to a meeting and refer to the timeline, and you tell me, well, the timeline has changed and you know what the next answer is going to be, and I can tell you now, oh, we forgot to update the timeline. That's what I'm trying to prevent from happening.
Wait, I can come back anytime you want to. What I'm telling you is, we keep this thing updated because this is what we do, but I'll be back here every once a month if that's what you want me to do.
No, I'm not asking for that, but I'm thinking of,
So we're gonna approve anything that happens on this. This is kind of like an internal document. It is an internal document
Yes.
for the DPW, and so they're keeping a look at this and as saying, hey, you know what? We need to make sure that we have all these things in place for whatever number of years out. But like, so for example, this was it that we're doing next, this District 8. You'll see on 2020, District 8, sewer, sanitary sewer. That's gonna come before this board. So, I mean, all these things, even, 2021, all that stuff, the price may change. I mean, it may change by 100,000 or
I
a
don't
million
think it's
bucks.
too much to ask, though, if there's any significant changes to this, that we bring it back to the board, absolutely. And even if we do need to update the board every 6 months, just to either say we're still on the right track that we predicted, or we're gonna make some changes, I don't think that's too much to ask.
Yeah. Mr. Atkins?
Excuse me. No, I think listening to Mr. Guzak and Mr. Massey, I agree as well. Like, from a project management standpoint, sometimes these timelines, you don't see them again. And we have a really hard job here determining, when water increases or rate increases come before this board, and when we have to look at budgets. And my experience last year is a lot of this just gets all piled together, and it's hard to to really digest everything. So I would like to see at a minimum, like this timeline, whoever is the keeper of this, to Mr. Guzak's point, if any of this goes into 2021, or maybe it's at the end of each of the fiscal years that we're looking at for the next couple of years, that if anything gets carried over.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes if these will all come before the board, but
See the overall plan.
the overall plan and how it's
together.
being captured. So.
So it's a budget tool, so, you're gonna see it every year anyway for the budget, because it's what we're basing what we're gonna spend in 2020 on, what we're gonna spend in 2021, so most of the time, a year in advance. These aren't the projects that surprise you, like, oh, quick, we need to build, let's hurry up and do the District 8 sewer this year. We thought it was 2 years from now. Usually these things take a lot of time, planning, engineering, and we've known District 8 sewer, it's just when was Dort Highway gonna be funded and ready to go, so it's kind of floating out there. Same thing with Tech Village. We could have them in here and say, we're ready to push, we're gonna start pushing dirt in June of 2020, and then we're ready to go, but by later this year, before we finalize the DPW budget, if they haven't moved and we haven't seen anything, we have a pretty good idea that those expenses are most likely could start in 2020, but they'll finish in 2021, and you'll be updated at that time as well. Every time we go through, so many of these are dependent on factors that are somewhat outside of our control, or it depends on when if development really spurred and took off quick, or maybe some big manufacturer or something comes into the Yancho Tree Farm property, and suddenly they're like, we need the capacity to put in this manufacturing, can we do that? Then we'd have to come back and be like, okay, we've updated it now because something triggered it, we're going to spend money in a year from now that we weren't necessarily anticipating spending or moving it up.
I think this helps to kind of see, that we're looking long-term, and that Ralph Tallis, that's doing the rate study, is gonna, factor this information in that is documented. And Any questions for Mr. Potter? Thank you very much for the education here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
We're glad to know that always, our DPW is looking out, 20, 30 years, and making sure our infrastructure plans are in place. I mean, great job. Okay, with that, we are going to review the Township Board agenda for Thursday, August 8th. And we'll have some approval of the minutes. We have on the consent agenda the treasurer's financial activity recap for $774,000. Mr. Mansour?
Yep. I had a couple of questions about that. I don't know whether the email that I sent went through, though, to Dennis. But there were a couple of things I was kind of looking through the treasurer's report and the budget. And I'm trying to tie out what's going on with the fire department and fire commission. So the information that was shared with us on the budget is through July 31st, correct? I think that's correct.
Correct.
Yeah. So in there, I don't think I saw any expenditures for the fire commission. So
You didn't get my email reply, apparently.
Okay.
We had some issue with email, maybe that's what happened.
Okay.
But from the fire commission, what you're seeing in here, when we transferred over from the fire department, what we were doing, you're not seeing anything from the fire commission because what we booked was revenues in, and now they became fire department expenses. So there are some expenses associated with the fire department, but not the fire commission, because when we took them over as of April 25th, we don't have any fire commission revenue or any fire commission expenses, with the idea that we put it in because we could have if we paid some of the bills and got reimbursed later, like the insurance. So that's there. There's certainly fire expenses are in here. We started paying everything as of April 25th moving forward, and you can see those. It's just that the fire commission, if we ended up like paying the insurance on the vehicles, for example, we've been paying it, and we can either charge the fire commission, have them receipt it back into us, or we can bill it out to the fire commission, or we can just pay it, write it off as fire commission, and it comes out of the final settlement. So it's there to be used for the dissolution procedure.
That's kind of what I was expecting to see, charges, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, ending the 24th, and then somehow the budget transfer or translation go, spike up into our fire
But-
department.
They're reporting it on their accounting
Okay.
until April 24th. So
Okay.
everything was run through the fire department or fire commission budget, and then it transferred to us. Then the revenue stayed with us that
Sure.
we had, and we started paying the normal expenses as a department of the township. So it wasn't running through the fire commission after the 25th.
Right.
And you won't see anything prior to that, because that would have been reported on the fire commission's budget.
Okay, all right. Okay. And there was another question, but I can't seem to find it in my mail here, but
The other question you had for me, let me,
I'll find it by Thursday.
Yes.
Here, Dennis is finding it.
I knew
Looking
that.
for it. I'll let Mr. Guzak go ahead.
Yeah, while he's looking for that, just so you know that, when we approved that $150,000 for the fire department to come over here, I had finance do a spreadsheet on that, so they're keeping track of every item that's coming through and going against that 150. So we've got a tally on that, because we do that on every budget item that goes out. I build a spreadsheet so we know exactly if we're over or under and how close we are. And we have had expenses, like you said. We've been paying fire expenses after that date, because I've seen them, they've been signed off by the fire chief, and of course we're paying them. And of course, they're keeping track of it, because they have a separate line item for fire on there, so it's all gonna back out with the one, when into the proper line items.
Okay.
The other question that Trustee Mansour had for me had to do with expenditures, and you had it as 497,
Yep.
100, 975, 400. I think you meant 450 because I was out of 400, and that 450 was for capital project outlay for roads. That's our 50/50, the 185,000.
Right.
So your question was, how come we haven't paid anything out of that year to date?
Yeah.
The road commission is notoriously slow in
Billing
providing us our invoices. So that's why you haven't seen anything. Here we are in August. This runs through July 31st. We haven't been, it's not uncommon for us to not see those invoices until months after they've completed the projects.
Okay, so there's kind of we should expect some kind of a payable or something that which coming in to use those funds.
Yeah, and I'm sure you'll start to see it. I can't think of the projects that they've completed so far this year, but they are notoriously slow in billing for our portion.
Yeah, I was just, after everything we've done, I was just surprised that we still haven't, we had the full funding there, so. Okay, all right, thank you.
And we do appreciate them allowing us to
Use the money.
Okay. Next thing that we'll have in the consent agenda is the board will consider a motion to approve the purchase of the Avaya IP office system from Teoma Systems for $41,207. Mr. Lehman?
Yeah, we've been exploring this option for a couple of years now. Most phone systems are designed to last approximately 10 years, and we hadn't ours are 10 or a little over 10 years old now. We've been exploring it for a couple of years, trying to find out what capabilities we need and what new phones will do. And so we've met with a variety of vendors, and Director Beller is here to answer any questions that you may have. But after about 2 years of exploring it and looking through it, we finally he went out and got 3 quotes on different systems and met with them to see which ones would actually be the closest to our needs. We currently have the Avaya voice over internet phone system. This is the new ones, the updated, that actually have much more functionality for what we need. Right now, we can't even page through the building. We can't page, handset to handset. We can't do the voice over speaker. From a safety factor, like from our police training on Alice shooter training, it's one of those things that they recommend, like you got to get that fixed. The other things are convenience features, like being able to have phones that automatically transfer, so I can have it transfer to your cell phone for Scott, who's out of the office. The phone rings, if he's not there, he can transfer it directly to his cell phone. Nobody knows that it's not ringing in his office, it'll go directly to his cell phone. Things like that, where we can constantly stay in contact instead of missing calls when we're in our office. So, and again, our phone system, I'm not positive, Robbie is 10 or 12 years old at this point, and
He is pretty much in the same time as the police department, maybe just a little bit before.
so the consultants that we worked with recommended, rather than, we were gonna have them come in and reprogram our current phones to get the most out of them. And they said, you're gonna spend, I don't remember, like $8,000 or $9,000 to have them come in and reprogram your phones, or you can put in new phone systems. And at this time, we've decided to ask the board to allow us to just update the phone systems completely. Robbie did meet with every one of the 3 vendors, and he'd be happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
They are very antiquated.
I have a question.
Mr. Massey.
Since they're so antiquated,
Robbie, will you come up to the podium?
my question is, does this satisfy all our needs?
Yes, it does.
It does.
Yeah.
So I won't hear this until another 10 years.
Yes,
You guarantee?
yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
10-year guarantee on technology is a pretty bold statement.
I was waiting to see who was going to catch that.
What's the biggest difference, Robbie, that we'll see, anybody that uses the phone here?
One thing, like Dennis said, was the mobile twinning. That's one thing that we're not licensed for right now, but it allows you to transfer calls to, so maybe you're leaving your office and have to go to a meeting, and you can transfer to your phone, and it's like you never left the office, and
Okay.
people won't know it.
Mhm.
Also, part of the capital projects that we had it scheduled for this year. We had 30,000 set aside for it. I know one thing that the police department was looking at doing is recording any incoming dispatch calls, and doing that on a constant basis, and also doing it on demand, so if they're in an interview or something, they can do that.
So this will replace the police department's phones as well, or?
Yes. We could have just upgraded our system and not changed the phones, but this replaces all the phones, and there's some other capabilities. Some that I've seen, it can link your Outlook accounts, your contacts to that. So there's some added functionality to the system.
What about departments? So let's say that building department, that the phone rings at one of our workers' desks, and can you program it so that if it's not answered after 4 rings or whatever, it automatically goes over to
Yes.
another employee's phone?
Yeah, they've got some call forwarding. So after, like right now, we've got ours set up. The fire department, one thing we did whenever we was forwarding that number from down there up here, was after 4 rings, it then goes to the dispatch. We can currently do that, but it's just a matter of the hunt group that we set up and programming that.
Hmm. Okay.
So,
All right.
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Let me make sure I understand this correctly, for it to be very helpful. Okay, so you're telling me if a call comes in, hypothetical situation, if a call comes in and I answer the phone, I'm shooting myself as an example. So they say, well, I'd like to speak to the supervisor. So I would be able to transfer that call immediately to the supervisor.
Yes,
although he's not in the office,
yes.
to his cell phone.
To my cell phone or wherever,
Yes.
or Mr. Limita or whoever.
Phone you have on the record.
Yeah. If someone calls Megan, for example, or Megan answers the phone and Dennis is expecting a call from somebody that he needs to get, and maybe Dennis is at home at lunch or at a meeting downtown Flint, they can transfer the call. She probably can call Dennis and say, hey, the call you've been waiting for is on the other line, and then transfer it to Dennis to his cell phone and he can get it.
So where I'm going,
From the customer's perspective, they have no idea that, it's going directly
yes,
to, and I think that's one of the biggest advantages from a customer service standpoint. They don't know that it's seamless to them. They call
Yes.
it, it's transferred.
yes. So moving forward to the next step. So I answer the phone. So I decide, well, I want to take this call for whatever reason. And then later it comes up before the board that there was a call that came in, was never transferred to Scott. Then at that point, we have another responsibility to take a deep dive and understand why it was not transferred to the supervisor.
Yeah.
You see where I'm going?
As
Well,
long
right now,
as it's set up by Scott, for his phone, as long as it gets transferred to his phone, it's gonna go to him. It would be if somebody didn't transfer it for whatever reason. If they call him direct, it'll ring right to his cell phone. Or if they call into the front desk and somebody transfers it, it'll ring to him. It would only be if somebody, didn't transfer it for whatever reason.
But we would know, because if we got some negative feedback,
Sure.
a resident called in
Right.
and they wanted to speak to Scott, wants to speak to Dennis. So I took the responsibility on my own to
I
respond
know
to
what
the
you're saying.
resident's call.
I hear what you're saying. I think we got it covered,
Okay, okay,
but I understand what you're saying.
okay.
Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, with this new package, is everybody gonna get a new phone at their
Yes.
desk?
Yeah, if you look at the bottom, we got the middle of the road quote for the phones. Now you can upgrade those phones or downgrade. Some of them, like over in the police department, are just wall phones or something that is not manned by anybody. We could downgrade it and save $82.50. Or if we want to upgrade it to a more advanced phone, it'd be $46.75 more. So we looked at that. The quote that I have in here is $37,869.55, but there's on the other sheet, there's an option for conference phones. We're looking at conference phones for our 2 conference areas here. That way,
Yeah.
we've got one, and
We
looking
need to
at
make
just
sure those
make
work.
sure they're staying in there.
Yeah,
So-
we need to make sure those work really well too.
But yes, everybody would get another phone.
Right, and then is there a main server here or not? There's no server, not
It replaces the
the
control
existing
unit.
server?
Yeah, the control unit there.
Okay. So we are getting quite a bit of equipment then. Besides a couple little extra features.
Right, and one thing, I think over in the police department, they have a server that they had for the body cams that we can utilize to store because all the calls that come in, are coming in WAV files. We can right now do a voicemail to email, but with all those dispatch calls, there's no way to easily retrieve those. And like if somebody said, hey, we got a call 2 weeks ago, going back through the email, you don't know which one it's sent
Right.
to. Then this kind of has a library that you can go back and search
Oh,
and pull.
very
those
good.
up.
Excellent. Mr. Massey?
A question regarding to the conference calls in various conference rooms. How many conference rooms do we have?
We've got 3
Plus mine.
plus yours.
Okay, that's where I'm going with. I'm glad you raised your hand. Will you have one?
I've always had one, but it's the only one. We carry it around with us when we need to do our conference calls. It's not, and then you have to plug it in and wait for it to fire up, and
Yes.
it's not the way we should be
Yeah,
doing this.
Okay.
it needs to be
So all
upgraded.
of the conference rooms will have a phone?
Yep.
The
Okay.
DDA
We want
uses
one
it
in
quite often.
Conference room D.
It hasn't been used as much right now.
Yeah, so I plan for conference room A and B and then yours.
We can always add D
Yeah, we can
later if
add
we
D.
need to.
So if you look on the back page or the second page, there's the pricing for it.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you very much, Ron. Appreciate it, Mr. Beller. Next item on the agenda is the board will consider a motion to approve payment of $13,659.10 to Aetna Supply for the annual census R&I meter reading system hosting fee. So I take it this is something we use for reading our water meters, Mr. Sears?
This is the brains of our meter reading system. Y'all know we read the meters from right here in Township Hall. We don't have to send somebody out to read each individual meter anymore. This is basically just a renewal hosting fee that you see every year, so that we can continue to do that.
Okay. Any questions? All right, thank you. Operational issues, the board will consider a resolution to adopt the police millage ballot language. And we had discussion on this.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd like for the attorney to weigh in on this if he doesn't mind.
I don't mind. It's the language should look similar to you because it's nearly identical to the language for our request for the fire millage. It reflects the 1 mil request for a 5-year period of time. It does note that we've got a headly rollback currently in the amount of 9.002 mils, and that will be bumped up to 1 mil if this millage passes in 2019. Assessing has included the estimated amount that the millage will collect in the first year, which is $1,339,500, and if it meets with your approval, if you adopt this on November 12th, it has to be sent quickly to the county for inclusion into their queue, I guess, of ballot questions. And I know that sometimes we get into discussions about what is a pure renewal versus what an increase is, and I think in that first sentence you find it interesting. You find actually an explanation of the headline amendment that many people don't care about and that we become blue in the face talking about. But if you're technically going to replace a mill with another mill, there's been a heavy rollback increase during that period of time, and the Michigan Townships Association has taken a position that if a millage has been subject to the rollback, to ask for even the nearly identical millage, which we're essentially doing, you have to characterize that as an increase. Those are all the dual safeguards we have in place for our taxpayers in the state of Michigan.
I know a lot of our taxpayers feel it's almost misleading, but the language that we use, but I know that's what the state requires.
It's the curse of the Headley Amendment.
Right.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So there's a certain cadence that happens with this in terms of public hearing, et cetera, et cetera.
For the police millage?
Right.
Are we on tack for that?
No, what we're going to do then is you're going to adopt this resolution actually at your Thursday meeting. There's no public hearing for this.
For the police millage?
Correct. And then that will be sent directly to the county and then placed on the ballot.
The next item, we'll be talking about a public hearing, but...
Yep, are we moving on?
Yep, so is everybody good?
Yep.
Okay. Now the other truth and taxation public hearing, I guess, is what we're talking about here, right? The board will consider a resolution to set the date for the public hearing.
The special assessment district for Grand
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Next item on the agenda, the board will consider a resolution to set the date, September 12th, for the public hearing regarding the consideration of a special assessment district for the repaving of Grand Walea. So it's pretty straightforward. Mr. Atkins?
Yeah, just a couple things. I've been getting a lot of calls, a lot of comments about, where we stand policy-wise and, looking at offering funding mechanisms to do subdivisions. We've heard some of that collectively as a board, and some of it we have not. I know there are 5 subdivisions that have either approached the township or are ready to approach the township, and I'm not sure if this board has a full list of that. I guess what I'm asking is maybe this would be good to talk about maybe at the roads task force. I think Mr. Massey is on that one, and kind of understand. I had a couple questions about how the 51% comes into play with collecting signatures. Is that a state requirement? You know, that kind of stuff. But I'd like to get in a little more detail of it, because that seems to be right now what puts a lot of people interacting with our board members, seems to be the roads in their subdivision. So I'd like to have some more info on that and figure out what we want to look at going forward. I'm not sure how many requests are out there, and I'd like to...
Well, I can tell you that, I mean, we get people, there's different levels of interest. You have people that call that have kind of a cursory, you know, question that, hey, how do I get my streets paved? And then you run through that process, and then, oh, okay, well, yeah, I don't know. Others, hey, then we want to get the ball rolling, and so Jeff talks with them, and if they're real interested, he holds a meeting with them and with the subdivision residents. We've talked about the idea of maybe having 2 of those a year. I know at least Mr. Lemata and I have having one in the spring and the fall. And we invite any resident from any subdivision to come to that meeting. And we bring somebody from the road commission, we have Mr. Sears, Mr. Lemata, whether treasurer or, you know, sussing, what have you, and kind of lay out the whole scenario from start to finish of what's required for the signatures, how it would work on your taxes, the questions about, you know, hey, can I pay this thing off when I sell my house, and, you know, all those kinds of things that everybody gets constantly asked. So twice a year, just have informational meetings to encourage people that if they're considering it, this is the meeting you need to be at. You know, if you can't make it, send a couple of your neighbors. But put it on the calendar and let people know every spring and every fall we're going to have one of these informational meetings to discuss it. And we haven't really brought that before the board, but I thought, you know, right now, you know, Mr. Sears will have a meeting with this subdivision this week, and 2 weeks later is one to another subdivision, and we're repeating ourselves over and over again. And why not just kind of have a town hall twice a year for that subject and get it all out there? And I don't know what your thoughts would be on that, but my thought would be to consolidate it. The other thing is that we're also making sure that everybody gets the same information, because if Jeff's doing it and then somebody else is doing it, or I'm doing it, what have you, I've never done anything like that, but I would rather have it consolidated to a couple of people who are doing it on a regular basis, so that we're getting consistent information out there, and we end up with less people coming before this board questioning why we're doing things the way we're doing them. So, Mr. Lemata?
So a suggestion for the board, I think Trustee Adkin brings up a good point. Like, so what's the policy? How does it work? Everybody should know we're in the middle of our policy and procedures review. Why don't we create that policy so that we can attach the one pager, how it works, and then the board sets a policy on how we spend the money. So I think that would be very helpful for them to understand, because you guys could then refer to policy. Our policy is, you know, and that would just be very helpful that it's consistent and it will last beyond this board, so it's not changing, or it doesn't depend on if the clerk's involved or that, you know, who's here. It's more about here's the policy and here's how you go about it.
Especially,
great suggestion.
Even including in there our policy on private streets and roads. You know, what our policy is on that, so that when somebody comes to Jeff or our clerk at the time, whoever it is, it's pretty black and white.
You could also address the concerns that were raised by private roads versus public roads, and you can put that in policy so it's immortalized.
Right. Mr. Massey?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, can we have a meeting prior to the reviewing the policies, like a meeting to actually put things in place for the policy?
Sure. Well, we're kind of doing that with finance, and I know, but yes, absolutely, the roads probably should, and absolutely.
I think that's where we need to go first.
Okay.
Okay, so we
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
throw some thoughts around.
I would let Mr. Lemata massage one for the roads along with Mr. Laddie maybe, and what our policy would be on streets and roads, and then bring it to our task force so that we kind of have one that, you know, what we do currently, and then we can massage it as to what we'd like to do in the future if we want to change it.
Yes, absolutely.
But Yeah, I mean, if anybody sees anything that we need a policy on, that's why I didn't want to rush into doing it, because I think there are a number of things that are coming up that we need to make sure are included in there. Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, just so you know that, we've been doing this for a long time, and of course, certain procedures have to be followed, and if they're not followed properly, of course, it doesn't get done, and Mr. Laddie will stop us, because right now, there are procedures in place that if you don't have the 51%, and if you don't have the proper people signing it, it has to be verified by the clerks, then it's been kicked out before, and people have been told that, but it's just a step that's, we've always been it's been verified with the township attorney, through the clerk, to make sure that the right documents have been submitted and they've been checked properly, so.
Yeah, we're moving along fine as far as
Right.
statutory requirements go. And there have been policies in the past that were created on an informal basis from department to department. But I think the idea of formalizing it
Well, I understand.
at the board level
Yeah,
is
it's a good
idea.
idea. Yeah, I'm not saying it's not a good idea. I'm just saying we do have follow rules, and of
Yeah.
course, it does have to go back to the state, because we just can't do what we want.
Oh, no, that's absolutely true.
Because you always check it, and we always verify with you, so.
That's correct.
But it's good to have a policy, and that way you can have a sheet you can hand out if you want.
Yeah, for the sake of making sure everybody's on the same page and communicating the same thing, and it also then isn't, well, that's Jeff's interpretation, Mr. Sears' interpretation versus Mr. Bennett's, and I'd much rather have it, hey, that's township policy, not Mr. Sears' policy. So, yeah, I don't think anybody's saying we've been doing anything different, but it just helps clarify it, and the next board, I mean, if we had an entirely new board, they've got it written. Okay, so, yes, Mr. Atkins.
Could we maybe pencil in some time to, I don't want to get too weighed down in the whole policy manual and let the roads not get a fair share of attention. I don't know what your thoughts would be on maybe having just a breakout session or something to where we can really start talking about policy of roads. We're getting a lot of requests, so.
Yeah, I mean, we have a roads task force that we've got pretty much the policy that we follow. It's just probably not documented completely, but internally here, we know, what the process is. It's probably something we need to commit to paper if all the other board members want to know. There's some intricacies probably that everybody doesn't know.
Like kind of getting some debate between the board of maybe setting some new rules of the road going forward, or how we want to, is the policy the same, or do we want to do something different? That kind of discussion. I don't know.
Different in terms of what, the funding or?
Yeah, private versus public. I think there's several things to kind of talk about now. I mean, from my perspective, I'd have, deeper questions about the 51% rule and private versus public, and some of those things I'd like to dive in a little deeper without just tying up
Some of them are going to be legal issues, right? I mean,
Right.
51% is something that the state's going to require.
Yeah.
And this is something that, and Dennis and I think can turn this around pretty quick, but I envision like a proposed policy, and then basically with explanations, whether they're legal based or policy based, and then room for discussion or prompts for discussion as far as policy goes. So really you can take a look at this thing and you can follow like a map, and then engage in the policy discussions, and then we can plug it all together.
There's some things of it that are going to be policy that we can decide, well, do we want to do this or do we want to do that? Other things are going to be state law, like the 51%.
Right.
That's going to be a law that, we have to follow. But in terms of, in the past, years ago, the township provided funding for subdivision streets?
Partial funding.
Right.
We provided a percentage.
Right,
Of
a
that,
small
then
percentage.
It became financially overwhelming for us.
Right, I mean, and even at this time, I mean, we're trying to put together money to fund just the primary roads at this point and match. And I don't know if everybody's seen it yet, but the county has increased their percentage, what they're going to give us next year, so we'll have to come up with a little bit more money, which is good. But, what if we allow Mr. Laddie and Mr. Lehman to put together our basic written policy on the roads? We have a task force, and we can invite everybody on the board once we get that wants to participate, and talk about it there, and then bring it to the board. And if we have further discussion here, we can do that. Does that work, Mr. Atkins?
Yeah, just one question, not to get into it tonight, but is the 51%, is that the state minimum? Can we change it as long as it's higher than 51%?
The 51% is important because really what it acts as an override clause. If the board had decided to carry off on a project by itself, and the board receives a petition in opposition from the residents, the 51% comes into play in order to override the board's decision. In other words, it lets the people decide to override a negative petition if 51% are in favor. So 51% is an important and specific number at the statutory level, not necessarily to gauge interest in a project, but we do it so that if we move forward, our decision can't be overridden by a petition in opposition. Right? So if we wanted to say, for example, if we're just trying to, and we want people to do that because we want them to not have to duplicate their efforts. For instance, if they come in with a higher number, for example, 65%, and then we get a petition in opposition, it can't be overruled. So I'll lay that all out for you in that policy, but it does have, again, there's an override provision, and then you can trump the override with 51%.
Okay.
Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, just one other thing I wanted to point out, probably everybody realizes it, but we actually go out and bond 99% of all these. We did not bond that one that was like $6,000, because that was declared a whole different deal. It was part of a 50-50 thing that the county said this road qualifies for that 50-50, so that was a whole different procedure. But we bond all these roads, and we do fund it temporarily when we first fund the money, but we're paid back from the bond. So it's not, none of the township's money is being paid for the end result, because we're all paid in whole from the bonds. We do pay the upfront portion to the county to start it, and we might pay the other portion, but then we're paid back from the bonds. So we're not using our funds only in a short-term basis, okay? Everybody understands it, but I want to make sure it was clear that we're not spending general fund money for roads. It's all bonded, and we get paid back for that temporary slight loan.
Good point. Okay, so we'll have that as a resolution at our meeting on Thursday as far as for Grand Walea. And so it looks like they're moving forward, and that'll be good to have another subdivision paved. Item C, which has been attracting lots of attention, is the board will consider resolution for the revision of the date for the Truth and Taxation public hearing to be held August 27th, 2019. So Mr. Lehman, any discussion on that?
I can weigh in on that, Supervisor Bennett. You had this before your last time, and we had the dates in, but due to a rounding error that the Director of Assessing made in creating it, we can't move forward. We have to redo it. So that's the request for, it'll come before you with some different millage amounts, slightly different, very slightly I might add. But then we have to redo the posting because those numbers are included in the posting. It has to be posted twice, so it has to run in a newspaper record twice before. So we have plenty of time for you to consider it. You'll get a new one. It should be done tomorrow. We'll forward it out to the board. We'll have copies for you on Thursday as well of what the actual millage rates are. But again, the truth in taxation, what we're trying to accomplish with this, and I know there's been some concern from the public, but what the truth in taxation allows us to do, if you didn't hold the truth in taxation hearing, you do not get to pick up the new taxable value of new construction. That's the difference. If we don't hold the truth in taxation hearing, you're gonna you'll get your inflation factor, which was 2.5 for the year from the state, and that's decided by the state, not by us. The Headley rollback takes place, which I don't remember the number, I didn't bring it with me this year, but 0.98, whatever. The truth in taxation allows us to capture new construction. That's the difference. It's why we do it, because we have, a team of 5 assessors who run around and make sure that they're out there all year long picking up the new construction, getting the value, putting it appropriately. If we didn't do it, we wouldn't get to capture it. We would just take our other millage, we'd take the Headley rollback. So we're giving up the ability to add to our taxable value. The concern where it says this is an increase in that posting, we're required to do because it's an increase in taxable value. not an increase in taxes. And we went around with the county equalization director, both former and the new one, about is there any way we can tweak the language so it doesn't read as hard as it is, but that is state mandated language. They won't let us change it. So when you read that first section of the posting, it says that it, the increase in 1.81 is what it's going to end up being. What that's telling you is that is the new construction. You're going to pick up revenue over what you would be able to do without the truth and taxation hearing. And it really is all about new construction, but we can't even insert that in there. The state mandates the language. And that's why it's so confusing. We do this every year. This isn't unique to our municipality. It's every municipality that holds the truth and taxation hearing. People see the word increase and they come in and they say, you're increasing my taxes. And you have to take the opportunity to say, we're not increasing your taxes. In fact, your millage rates have rolled back due to the Headley Amendment. What we are doing is we're capturing the taxable value of new construction. So our taxable value will go up as a township based upon new construction. The Magna building, anybody who added a garage, did a big remodel in their house. We capture all that with our assessing, and that's what it's for. So I know it's really confusing. If the state would allow the language to be cleaned up, maybe they do it on purpose. I don't know, but it's frustrating. It's frustrating for residents. It's frustrating for us to go through this, and it's just that unique thing in state law that mandates the language.
It definitely gets people's attention, and maybe that was the intention of the law, because when people read the thing, they get very upset that it looks like we're increasing taxes. And I've tried to let them know that a township board, we can't increase taxes without the vote of our residents. And so I think, I've been able to explain in some way to some people on social media, but I think, a fact sheet even that we can pull out once a year whenever we do this, I think would be helpful as well. That whether we use that to put on Nextdoor and Facebook and the other means, or our website, whatever, I think would be very helpful as well. Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, can the language be written as such when you send it out to the resident without using the word increase?
No.
You have to use the word.
You have to use the word increase because we're increasing our taxable value, our overall township taxable value, by the addition of the new construction.
But I think if we put together a fact sheet with our own explanation, I mean, we've got to legally put that language out, but if we had a fact sheet that puts it in our own words, in addition to that we can put on social media, whatever, I think people will understand.
So the word, I want to understand this correctly. The word increase has to be inserted. So if the word increase has to be inserted, there's no other way to interpret it but your taxes are increasing.
But if you look at the language, what it's saying is that you're increasing the taxable value over what you would have had you not held the truth and taxation hearing. And then it goes on and says you're going to increase the inflation factor was 2.52 for the year. That's mandated by the state. They send it out and they say, here's your inflation factor for the year. In the recession, we had negative inflation factors. Now they're positive at least, but you still pay less. Your actual millage rates go down, and I guess the easiest way to do it is to take the information off the L4029s that report our millage rates, and you take last year's and this year's and you put them side by side, and you actually show somebody, here's the millage and here's what it's going to be. It's what we're trying to do is prevent continued loss. I mean, what people don't realize, like personal property tax, we got 4 more years before it goes away. I mean, we continue to get hit on our revenue side. This is our way. I mean, otherwise, why have our assessors go out and assess, all of this work that they do every year if we're not going to capture the value, the new value?
So, would it be correct to say, based on your explanation, would it be correct to say from a finance point of view, this is how you balance your taxes? Because really that's what you're doing. Mathematically, you're balancing your taxes.
We're just capturing the new value.
I understand what you're saying. you're using the terminology that's throwing you off, but you're actually balancing. On the left hand of the equation, you got 5. On the right hand of the equation, I'm just using a number, you got 6. So the left goes down and the 6 balance out the left. I mean, that's what you just said. Because if you want to show that your millage rates have gone down, that's what you said. Okay?
They roll back every year because of...
They roll back. But you capture that with the true taxation.
No, we don't capture that. That's still taking place. That Headley rollback is still going to continue.
Yes.
The only thing we're doing with truth and taxation is capturing new construction. That's it. That's the only
But that's the same thing as balancing it out.
It's not balancing. It's recognizing that there's been new construction in your community. That's all it does.
Well, I know you don't want to get into the actual math of it, but I'm not saying you're dodging it, okay? But I want to make it clear. On the left side of the equation is going down, on the right side of the equation is increasing.
Only if you have new construction.
Well, here's what I'm saying.
So if you've got a municipality that has no new construction, there's no balancing, it's going down.
Okay, now you answered my question. So when you send out the information, you don't have it written as such. That's my point. That only if there's no new construction. If you said that, that would be no confusion.
But you can't
Well, let's put
So
together.
what? What'd you say?
But you can't put that in there. The language is prescribed by the state. That's what it said. It's-
So let us put together a fact sheet
That's exactly right.
and kind of try and explain it a little better.
Now he tells me you can't say that because...
Well, you can't change the official hearing language, publication language. Mr. Atkins?
Just now that we're talking about new construction, it would be good also to every year to kind of show our residents what's going on. You know, we know bits and pieces of it and get the building department's report and permits, but I don't even know that number. It'd be a good number to know, you know.
To have
Just as
maybe
total,
a recap of the total new construction in the township, kind of a layout of all, maybe our building department.
residential and buildings and commercial.
From a dollar amount, you get it after the board of review, when they publish that. The March board of review, once that's been done, then we know what the dollar amount captured. If you're talking about the actual like units or whatever, we can have building, they put that in their monthly reports, usually kind of update us, but we can do an annual thing that really would tell you like, hey, it was 100 new residential units, you know, X amount of commercial, whatever.
I think that would be impressive to see the new commercial, whether it's expansions as well as new buildings. You know, he might put it in his quarterly report or what have you, or monthly report, but to see that all summarized, I think might be impressive at the end of the year. Mr. Mansur?
Question, not to belabor this much longer, but so if I sold a house and it rebaselined with my new sale price, would that be a portion of this as well when you can say new construction? I mean, those.
No, but what happens if you sell the house, it uncaps.
Yep.
So the new owner comes in and it's
Yep.
uncapped. So that's different than the truth and taxation. We're not capturing the uncapping, because that's going to happen anyways. That we don't need to hold a truth and taxation. That's going to get captured to the new owner. The only thing we'll capture with truth and taxation is absolutely new construction.
You guys want to go over that one more time?
Could we? Could we stand it?
We got it. We got it for the time being.
Okay. I think a fact sheet
Explained
will
it 40 times.
I think the fact sheet we could use from year to year.
Yeah.
Just substitute the new numbers, so. Okay, thank you. Item D, the board will consider a motion to authorize $13,000 for mailing of postcards to 26,500 registered voters asking if they want to be part of our permanent absentee voter list. So, Mr. Limita?
This comes before you at the request of Clerk Lane. She's unable to be here this evening, and it was really brought to Clerk Lane's attention by her deputy clerk, Lynn Henry, and what they're trying to do, as you guys are aware, the new proposal went through last November about same-day voter registration, no reason, absentee voting. What happens with this is that you have to have enough ballots, you can't run out. So what they're trying to do is gauge how many absentee ballots should they have versus normal ballots should they have? Because there's a pretty considerable expense associated with how many we have, and we have to have enough. Now that people can walk in, grab an absentee ballot and fill it out with no reason, we expect that that number is going to go up considerably. How considerably will it be? We don't have any clue. And so in order to get a handle on what we need to budget and how many we need to order, that was a request from the deputy clerk through the clerk to the board. Yes, it comes with a considerable price tag of $13,450. You may run the risk that you get a postcard to somebody saying, do you want to be on the permanent absentee voter list? They're like, well, yeah, that sounds good. That may not have considered that previously. Some folks just like to be able to come in and actually vote on election day. So they really don't have a clue. Should we have, 5,000 absentee ballots? Should we have 10,000 absentee ballots? What's going to be the impact of Proposal 18.3? And nobody knows at this time. Plus, we've got major elections next year. So I think that's where the request came from, an overabundance of caution perhaps, rather than just spend a bunch of money to get, well, we better be prepared and have 12,000 absentee ballots and still have enough normal ballots to, if they come in and vote. And that's where the request came from.
You can order absentee ballots after, there isn't like once and done from what I understand. You can continue to order them. If you're running low, you can put in another order and get more of them.
You can, but the problem with 18.3 is that now they can walk in
on the day of the election.
2 days before, and you can't order them 2 days before.
Right.
And so what if a bunch of them come in and go, yeah, give me that absentee ballot? That's where the concern lies.
Mr. Massey?
I understand what you've said very clearly, Superintendent. But from a mathematic perspective, I've never seen such explained as you explained it. Okay, last year, if you look back over the years, you collected data how many absentee ballots have been given out. Now, any common sense person mathematically would figure it out and say it's not going to be a 100% increase, and most likely it's not going to be a 50% increase. That increase is going to be so minute till it just has never happened before. When you collect all the data around the absentee ballots, you would see that this is a lot of money just to send out a postcard that may not ever get to the person. This, you know what this reminds me of? I'm just going to be honest with you. This reminds me of a campaign fund. This is used for campaign money. That's all it's used for. There's no other way you can justify this. Spending this kind of money for absentee ballot. What happens, you order, you get all of the cards back, and for some unknown reason they say, well, we need 100% more. And you end up using less than 50%. So how do you justify that?
Well, you're going to use most of them, Trustee Massey, because you're going to mail them to them. It's a permanent absentee, so if you're on that permanent list, they automatically mail it to your address for you. So that's why they're trying to figure it out, is because they're going to get those ballots in and they're going to send it to you if you ask to be put on the permanent list.
I don't buy into it.
Now, I know Miss Lane isn't here, and I'll ask her. We can ask her some of these questions on Thursday when she's here.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering how much it is to just print a bunch of absentee ballots and have them on hand. But I think one of the things we can consider is putting I've seen some other townships that they have it on their website that they've already got a form on there that says, hey, if you want an absentee ballot, and outlines a new law. I think Linden has it on theirs, or Argentine, or somebody I saw, and basically tell them to fill out the form. And we could stick the same form in the Grand Blanc View probably for a few $100. Paul would give us a great deal on it.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I think Mr. Guzak had his hand up, and then you, Mr. Massey.
Yeah, I just want to check with Mr. Laddie. I think all those absentee ballots are numbered and they have to be recorded and maintained, right?
I think that's true.
And then when one's voided, they have to, procedure is they have to void it, they have to write down the number, so when the state comes in or the county comes in, they have to see every ballot, and you just can't generate numbers. So I don't know, maybe they are doing that, but I know there's a lot of procedures there that you have to have numbered ballots and they have to be, everyone has to be accounted for, I believe, is that
Well, I
correct?
think you're right, and I don't know all the nuances of.
Yeah.
Right.
No, they weren't putting the ballots in the paper, they were on their website. They were basically simply putting the form saying that if you want to be included on, all this postcard's gonna do is put you on the permanent AV list. What is basically, you could have on the website or in the paper saying if you wanna be on the permanent absentee voter list,
Yeah.
send in your name and we'll put you on the list. So, I mean, this doesn't do any different than having a form,
Let me ask the,
except it gets mailed out.
let me ask the most important question, and I already have the answer. Since it's $13,450, tell me how much one absentee ballot costs to be printed.
It's gotta be less than, I don't know. Well, I've got that listed in my question to find out from Ms.
Right.
Lane, how much is 1,000, I mean, if we increased the number of absentee ballots that we printed last time by 50%, how much would that be? I don't know, but Mr. Mansour had his hand up.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Massey. I mean, when you send out these kind of things, your response rates is notoriously low. So, even if we were to get some back, are people gonna fill them out? I'd say yes, and then only certain people are going to return them, and then only certain people who return them are actually going to sign up for the absentee ballot. So it just doesn't, I guess I just don't see it.
I also spoke with one of our local legislators, and they said they're going to be putting on a big push to let people know about the new law on a state basis. So the state of Michigan actually is going to be promoting this, and we might be duplicating efforts. So,
Okay.
so we can ask Ms. Lane a few more questions on Thursday about it and make a decision then. With that, I think that completes Thursday's agenda. And Mr. Laddie,
I think if you still have some attention to give, we'd like to have a brief executive session to discuss an employee contract negotiation.
okay. Mr. Lehman, did you have anything before we go into that, or?
Nope.
Okay, is there a motion to go into executive session?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay, since the clerk isn't here, I'll ask for the vote. Mr. Mansour,
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, we'll reconvene in the conference room in just a minute.